Oh, hi, didn't see you there. I'm F. Scott Fitzgerald. I'm here to tell you about the 1920s, but first, more about myself. Now, see this book right here? This is a good book. It's one of the greatest books. Almost every high school in America reads this book. And when I wrote this, it was the best-selling of my own books. And I could never top it. I kept trying to top it, couldn't top it. Made me really sad. Anyways, in the 1920s, there was some crazy stuff. There was women's sports, baseball. Sports were thriving. So let's go look at some baseball. Come on! Alrighty, welcome to the local sports broadcast channel. We have Philip England over here, Maverick Gray on my left, and we're going to be talking about 1920 sports today. Philip, take it away.
Alright, well first I'd like to talk about how baseball has become so popular. Baseball started back during the Civil War when soldiers at camps invented the game. The game spread from town to town and it really caught fire and everyone loved it. Inventions like the radio has also made the game more popular and has allowed everyone to keep up with it and keep up with their favorite teams. Babe Ruth has also been the face of baseball, and he has given the game a large fan base. Nothing excites the crowd more than when he hits a home run, and Babe Ruth does it so good, and he does it all the time. This has truly led for baseball to have a golden age.
Alrighty, thanks Philip for the wonderful story. Now on to some breaking news. 8 White Sox players agreed to throw the World Series for $100,000 each. Now, 2 of the 3 White Sox pitchers were in on the fix. Eddie Cicotte pitched the first game, and the Reds won 9-1. Now, Claude Williams pitched the second game, and the Reds won. Now, the third pitcher for the White Sox wasn't in on the fix, however. The White Sox won that game 3-0. The Reds won the next 2 games to put the series at 4-1. Apparently, the gamblers weren't paying up, however, because the White Sox won the next 2 games, making the series 4-3. The Reds won the next game, however, and they became the World Series champions.
Ball 1. Ball 2. Ball 3. Ball.
Alright, I'm sorry about that. Jeremy had to take 5, but I'm going to fill in for him. We're going to jump over to Maverick and talk about Satchel Paige.
Satchel Paige had an interesting story while he's grown up. He was actually sent to reform school when he was 12, actually 2 weeks before his 12th birthday, for stealing suitcases and anything else he could get his hands on at the L&N station he worked at, and for also skipping school. But while he was at reform school, that's where he learned how to pitch. Edward Byrd was a baseball coach there, and he was the first person to teach Satchel the fundamentals of baseball, and that's where the Paige pose was born. He began his professional career in the Negro Leagues in the 1920s after he was released from reform school, and there was no record keeping in the Negro Leagues, so he kept his own records, and this was known as the Paige Almanac. It had him pitching more than 2,500 games, playing for 250 teams through 250 shutouts, and his per-game strikeout record was 22. This would have been an all-time record in all of baseball, but nobody really knows if it's true because there wasn't really any record keeping. He also claims he threw 50 no-hitters, 29 starts in a single month, 21 straight wins, 62 consecutive scoreless innings, 153 pitching appearances in a single year, and 3 wins in one day.
Steve Reich. Steve Reich. You're out!
And now over to Jaden for women's sports. Thank you, Maverick, for the introduction. Today we're going to be talking about women's sports from the 1920s and how it was considered to be the golden age of sports for women. First topic is going to be on swimming and a girl named Gertrude Ertl. She was born in New York City on October 23, 1905. In 1924, she swam at the Olympic Games in Paris where her freestyle team won 3 medals. In 1925, she began training to swim across the English Channel, the 21 miles of water between England and the European mainland. 5 male swimmers already crossed the channel. The first was English swimmer Matthew Webb in 1875, but she wanted to be the first woman to achieve this goal. Earl's first attempt to swim the channel in 1925 was disqualified halfway through on technicality. She made her second successful try on August 6, 1926. She started at the Cape Grisnez on the French coast wearing a 2-piece bathing suit with goggles and a swim cap. She coated her body with lanolin as protection from jellyfish stings and the water's cold temperature. Sport that took a large growth in the 1920s for women was tennis. Mola Mallory was the dominant U.S. player. There was also Helen Wills, who was very outstanding and won her first U.S. championship in 1923. Besides her Olympic medals, Wills won 6 U.S. championships, 3 Wimbledon titles, 2 French championships in the 1920s. She married in 1929 as Helen Wills Moody, won 5 more Wimbledon titles, 2 French championships, and 1...
Well, you gotta get that Miss Connor follow through in.
The next big thing for women was track and field. In 1921, women's events were added to the NCAA championship. In 1928, the women's sports movement influenced track and field to be added to the Olympic Games. Women's collegiate track and field boomed during the time period before the 1930s decline. And that's going to be all we have for women's sports in the 1920s.
My feet feel like I got needles in them. They're in my shoes.
So, I actually had a pretty interesting family life. My father, Edward, he created a manufacturing company and they made wicker, but that failed pretty quickly. So he actually became a salesman after that, and that caused us to move back and forth for a little bit, and he eventually got fired from that though. So we had to move back to St. Paul and live off my mother's inheritance, but he ended up actually getting an office job, but he hated it and became an alcoholic. Kind of ruined the family. Oh, I remember Princeton. Princeton's where I went to college. I wanted to get a degree from there, but I ended up getting really sick, and I didn't have a lot of money, and I didn't want to keep buying ramen noodles. So I went home, spent time with my family, but I really needed that degree, so I ended up going back, but I left again without a degree. So I joined the Army, right there. See that puppy? At one of the Army bases I was transferred to, I actually met my beautiful wife Zelda. That's her right over there.
Hi, Scotty.
How you doing, Zelda? How's the...
It's still bipolar disease. You know how it goes.
Alright. Anyways, I wrote a book after you. Did you know that?
You did?
Yeah, it's 10 Years a Night. It's about how you have, like, mental illness. It's schizophrenia.
You have a mental illness?
Since that one failed, I wrote The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. That also was not as good. After I wrote The Great Gatsby, I wrote Tender as the Night. It was inspired by my wife Zelda. but it wasn't as good. I also wrote stories for the newspaper, such as The Diamond as Big as the Ritz. That also wasn't as good. So I tried again. I wrote The Camel's Back. And you guessed it, it wasn't as good. Well, those are just some of the highlights of the 1920s, and thanks everybody for listening. But if you excuse me, I have a book about gravity to finish that I just can't seem to put down.